I've wanted this forever. This is Transmaniacon by John Shirley. You're going to love that cover as well, it's fantastic. But Galactic Effectuator, you can't go wrong with that. Anything with galactic in the title is worth looking at, and use the word like effectuator next to it. That's what I mean. My theory of titles is if the title is interesting, I'll buy it. It's that simple. I used to have a copy of the first one, just entitled Roderick, and I got rid of it, which is silly because it's kerosene. I'm making moves to get a fresh copy, so I've got that one. That was a few quid off a chap in Bristol on eBay who I've got lots of stuff from. He's very, very good. His stuff's always in great nick and reasonably priced, so I'm very pleased with that. Love that cover. And of course it's the wonderful Granada. This is the wonderful Granada. There we go. Love Granada and Grafton, as you know, so that's quite nice. So I just sort of trying to mop up my bits of Sladek I don't have really. I'm filling in my Bob Shaw gaps, and there were more than I thought. And this is 1 Million Tomorrows, which is a book about immortality, and there's lots of those in SF, Silverberg, Vance, what have you, lots of others. And I've never read this one. It's quite an early one. Hello, Stephen E. Andrews, Outlaw Bookseller here, and yes, I've had a haircut, and it's time for a book haul. Why is it a book haul as opposed to a collector's diary entry? Well, I was doing a collector's diary, but I got bored with the format, but it'll come back, don't worry. I just decided it was time for a book haul. So we got a Coke Zero, we're feeling quite Italianate, hence all the blue. And I'm absolutely exhausted. I've been to work this week. I've just had a big bit of editing going on the video you would have seen earlier in the week if you watch my out and about stuff. If you don't, you should, because it's good, clean fun. So yeah, time for an SF and fantasy book haul. What a treat, I hear you say. Anyway, off we go. So, watch and learn, as they say. This isn't one of those channels where we're going to talk about the regular stuff. We're going to talk about the irregular stuff. There'll be some famous things, yeah, I know, but there'll be lots of irregular stuff. Obscurities, unknowns, underappreciated, all that good, clean fun. So, just to start, I noticed recently that Scott Bradfield, if you don't watch Scott's channel, you should, because he's a good writer. He's very funny. He has a wonderfully ramshackle approach, which I love. I've mentioned it before, I know, but you should be watching his stuff. He's just got through all of Lovecraft. He's finished. He's been doing it for years on and off and has never been convinced, but now he is. So Lovecraft. He talks about S.T. Joshi and the current editions, which are Penguin One Classics in the UK. Let me show you the real thing, kids. If you want Lovecraft, right, what we're talking here is Arkham House. This is one of my Arkham House ones. This is the real thing. So, if you can get hold of them, get Arkham House. That's the job. And I'm not sure, to be honest, if Arkham is operating at the moment. I need to look on the website, because there was a sort of legal dispute around August Derleth's daughter, because August passed on. But yeah, look at that. That's Dagon. That's what you want, really. And the deep ones, the Shadow of Rinsmouth, all that watery stuff. So if you're going to do Lovecraft, come to me when you've done the Arkham House editions. Anyway, enough braggadocio. Let's see what else we've got. I'm not going to unbox anything today because it's already unboxed, but I thought I'd show you some very recent acquisitions and some things I bought over the last few months. So I kind of missed out of previous sort of book hauls and what have you, collector's diaries and things. It's because I've been selling stuff on eBay to finance new purchases and to clear things through and what have you. And I don't really want to show you any new books apart from this one. Again, I mentioned Scott Bradfield, his channel, and this is The World Set Free by H.G. Wells in MIT's Radium Age imprint. They've done 4 of these so far. This is a Wells which I know of, and I have had other editions, but I've never got around to reading it. This is the Atom Bomb one, and it's got a cover by Seth, the wonderful comic artist, who I really like, who I believe is Canadian, and really, really nice. And Radium Age, what does that mean? It's mostly sort of SF from between 1900 and 1925, and some of it, it's obviously before the sort of dawn of the magazines and what have you. And I guess some of it is pretty clunky. I probably won't buy all of it. I do find that with that period that the cream has already risen to the top. There are interesting books which are arguably influential, but I think we already know what they are in most cases. But that's out there, so that's worth picking up. They're a really nice series, so look out for those. So what's been the jewel in the crown recently? Well, I have to say I was very, 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 very pleased indeed to get this, because I've wanted this for years, and I'm just going to let the anticipation build up now, and you probably won't have a clue what it is. This is Transmaniacon by John Shirley, published by Zebra Books at the end of the 70s, and I've been after one of these for a very long time. It's the only one I've ever seen. There have been others on sale on the internet for as much as £45. Phew. I paid a lot less than that. I think I paid about £5 for this. And you know, it does have a bit of a rippled spine, and it's not entirely mint, but I'm really pleased. Transmaniacon, that's a reference to a song by a band called the Blue Oyster Cult, entitled Transmaniacon MC, and of course MC stands for Motorcycle Club. And there's a little sort of epigraph in here where John Shirley, the author, he dedicates the book to the Blue Oyster Cult, to Patti Smith as well. Patti Smith, of course, punk rock icon. She, at that point, well, a few years before this, was going out with Alan Lanier, the Blue Oyster Cult's keyboard player, and she wrote a song for them called Career of Evil. And you know, if you're a sort of J.K. Rowling fan, which I hope you're not, she wrote a book under her Robert Galbraith pseudonym, the one that was outed, a crime novel in the Cormoran Strike series called Career of Evil, which actually referenced the character's mother as being a former Blue Oyster Cult groupie. And I got interested for about 10 minutes and read the first couple of chapters, but I couldn't get on with it really. It was fairly dull. But, you know, it does show that J.K. Rowling, you know, she's sort of looking at the counterculture bit there. Well done. And also there's a dedication to Leslie Fiedler, who's an academic who wrote some great stuff about Philip Jose Farmer. And also to Aleister Crowley, the wickedest man in the world, the old black magician, you know, inspired everybody. And he says, Blue Oyster Cult, Patti Smith, Leslie Fiedler and Aleister Crowley are not necessarily in that order. And he puts order in inverted commas, parenthesis. So is he referring to a magical order? Who can say? And I haven't read this yet. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be tough, abrasive, no nonsense. And John Shirley, at that point, was in lots of Bay Area punk bands in San Francisco. And he used to call himself Johnny Paranoid. And he's a cool guy, John. He really is. And at one point, I think it was 1998, I was editing a literary diary for a book-selling company. And it was on the theme of identity. I mentioned this in my Philip K. Dick video about Our Friends from Frolics 8, which lots of you haven't watched yet. I hope you do. And I quoted in that a paragraph from John's book, Come A-Walkin, which is one of the sort of seminal cyberpunk books, pre-cyberpunk. It's certainly one of the seminal punk science fiction books. He definitely put the punk into cyberpunk. And Come A-Walkin is a great book. And at that point, I think it was published by a firm called Eyeball. And I had to write for permission to put a quotation in. And they were very gracious. They were very excited. And John was very pleased. And he wrote back and he said, oh, that's a rocking thing. And I included Come A-Walkin a few years later in my book 100 Must-Read Science Fiction Novels, and he was pleased about that as well. He sent me a copy of his then new book Creepers, and I said, look, can I use that quotation, it's a rocking thing, on the back of any future book I write in reference to 100 Must-Read SF novels? He said, yeah, sure. So that went on the back of 100 Must-Read Fantasy Novels. So what a cool guy he is. So yeah, Transmaniacon MC, so I'm really pleased with that. That's kind of one of my scores of the year really, and that's going to be great. And I do like these very hard, abrasive 80s books. It's the end of 70s, the cusp of the 80s, you know, the way decades don't always start and finish sort of perfectly, they overlap and what have you. And you know, I would put his work alongside that of K.W. Jeter, Dr. Ada, which I talked about recently, and also Lewis Shiner's Frontera, which I'm going to talk about at length at some point. If you ever see Lewis Shiner's Frontera or this, pick them up because they're fantastic books. Very recently, about a week ago, in the post, I received this David Gerrold Space Skimmer, which I got from those wonderful people at Zardos, All You Need Is Books. This was only a few quid. And I just bought it because I liked the cover. And I talked about David Gerrold a while ago. I bought his dinosaur book, and I thought, I just liked the look of it, and I thought, well, I'll go with that. That's rather cute, and it's Del Rey. So it does have a slight lean to the spine and a bit of a ripple, but it was only £2 or £3, so you know, you can't argue with that. So I'm going to go with that. We'll see what comes out of that, because I'm sort of building up my collection of David's books a little bit. He's not a major figure, but I do like his stuff, and I do find it great fun. But I also have one here which I haven't unwrapped yet, so I'm going to take this out of the cellophane now. And as you can see, this is a pan lozenge. Now, you know, why haven't I got this? Well, I'll tell you why, because I've never got round to it, and it's always hard to find decent copies of this. This is Theodore Sturgeon, as you see, Case and the Dreamer. Fantastic cover there of a lady floating in space. That's really my sort of jam, you know. If you put somebody floating in space, that's very, very much my thing. And I'm just going to pop this out of the cellophane now. We're getting a satisfying rustle. There it goes. And yeah, I got this on eBay, and an offer was made to me because I think it was usually £8, and they knocked it right the way down, and that was good. And there we are, beautiful silver lozenge. If you've not watched my pan lozenge video, please do. So this goes in the collection, and I've always been intrigued by what it says on the back. There's 3 headlines: in space, on Vexveld, on Earth. So it's 3 novellas, and what it says about underneath on Vexveld. Well, what's Vexveld, you tell? So it's a planet, it's the name of a planet, Vexveld. That's such good SF writing, it's got such power in it. Conjures up an image of velvet with an X in it, really quite something. And it says, on Vexveld, why would human beings rather die insane and in agony rather than accept the conventions of this pastoral planet and its beautiful people? That sounds interesting, doesn't it? And on Earth, a dreadful, outrageous idea. But with money, no object, the only way is to find out whether the thing is impossible is to try it. So there you go. So that's intriguing. So Sturgeon, I blow hot and cold about. He's got massive critical reputation. I've never been entirely satisfied with Sturgeon. I find him uneven. There are moments where the prose is just incredible, and others where it seems quite clunky, but he's got this massive reputation. I probably could read a lot more. I've read More Than Human, Some of Your Blood, some short stories, you know, other stuff as well. And I'm waiting for him to clobber me over the head. He's never quite managed it. He does it in moments. So, you know, we'll see. Maybe I'll focus more on the shorter works. I have read some and they're good, but I can't always see. I think maybe in comparison to some of the other Golden Age people, he's better than them. He probably is in a literary sense, but he never quite gets me where I live, and I want him to. So we'll see. Case and the Dreamer. Another little filler. Something which I didn't have. I'm filling my Bob Shaw gaps. This is an early one from the late 60s, early 70s, 1 Million Tomorrows. Never got around to getting that for some reason. It's been out of print for years and years and years. But Immortality, one of the classic 60s themes in SF. It was around before, of course. It's always been there. So I've got that aside. I have read a Bob Shaw recently, one I'd never got round to. And this is The Peace Machine, as you see in Gollanc's Yellow Jacket. And this book's always really bugged me because originally when it was first published, which I think was about 1976, it was called Ground Zero Man, which I think is a fantastic title. And it's about a guy who invents a device which, if he presses a button, it will cause a chain reaction and all the nuclear bombs on Earth will go off. So he sort of decides to threaten the world and say, look, if you don't deactivate all the weapons, I'm going to push this and boom, it'll go up. And it never had a hardcover. I think it was published by Transworld, by Corgi in the UK as Ground Zero Man. And then it got reissued in 1986 as The Peace Machine. And I always thought, you know, what a rubbish title. Why would you retitle a book The Peace Machine when it was called Ground Zero Man? And this is apparently revised in a minor way. Throughout the book, the character refers to himself as the Ground Zero Man. And I enjoyed it. I think it's a minor show, but even with a minor show, you get really good writing and you get fantastic characterization, the sort of characterization you get in mainstream novels. Really good. Shaw's excellent on sort of conflicts between men and women. And the character in this, he's working as an engineer and his wife is insanely jealous of him. And he comes up with this device which he thinks is going to end all wars. And it's very small and short. And as you see, it's bagged there in the classic manner. But I really enjoyed it because the writing was really good. And even though it's not a major show, I wouldn't put it up there with Wreath of Stars or Other Days, Other Eyes, which are two of my favourites. I did really enjoy it. You know, if you've never read Bob Shaw, you really should. He's fantastic. So very pleased to read that. But if only there'd been a hardcover entitled Ground Zero Man. What can you do? So another little score. A while ago when I showed you some book club editions, one of them was, I showed you this, Poul Anderson, The Avatar, in Readers Union Book Club from around about 1980. And I bought this. This is about £4 and it's in really good nick. It's really, really nice. And I've been on a Poul Anderson kick pretty much since I started the channel, as those of you who've watched for quite some time will know. And I got this in case I couldn't ever get the proper Sidgwick edition, because the Sidgwick edition is quite uncommon. And there was one on Abe, a dealer I buy from sometimes, and it was really, really expensive, but I really wanted it, but I couldn't possibly justify it. So I looked around, there's other copies out there, and there was an estate. And then I found this one online for a mere £10. It does have some foxing and what have you. It's a bit of brown there. It's not 100% mint, but it'll do. I would say it's near fine, and it's got a lovely jacket, so I'm very pleased with that. I do have a real thing for Sidgwick these days, and just to compare them side by side, and as you see, they are the same format but completely different in terms of the thickness, so that's going to be quite interesting to sort of look at that. But that one's going to go on eBay, so if anybody needs a decent copy of the Avatar, that's be going on eBay. But yeah, I'm really, really, really pleased with that. That's like a major thing off my wants list, so great stuff. And that sort of comes from round about 1980. It is 1980. So yeah, £6.95 in hardcover. Those are the days. Look at that. So I was very, very pleased with that. A couple of things I picked up, sort of fillers really. Thomas M. Disch. I've been trying to complete my Thomas M. Disch collection, and I never got around to buying The Prisoner. The Prisoner actually is in print. There's a penguin of it, because there was that relaunched TV series a while ago with Ian McKellen, which didn't really take off, and I wasn't really interested in seeing it. I'd rather stick to the original. I'm not a Prisoner nut. I think it's interesting. McGowan I think is fantastic. He's wonderful as Dr. Paul Ruth in David Cronenberg's Scanners, which is one of my favourite SF films. And yeah, I got this recently, nice and cheap, Unbroken Spine. And this is about sort of a 1979 edition, and look forward to picking that up. The idea of Tom Disch writing a TV tie-in is so obscure and so such a weird idea. You know, that somebody as literary as Disch would do this. Obviously the money was there. The Dobson hardcover is the first. That usually goes about 50 quid in really good nick. But you know, when you can get this for less than a fiver, that's what you're going to do, isn't it really? So there you go. Something else that I didn't have in the collection, which I have read, I don't know why I didn't have in the collection anymore, was Brian Aldiss, The Molassia Tapestry, which is a fantasy novel. This is actually in my book, 100 Must-Read Fantasy Novels, and I came across this, Unbroken Spine, Panther. This is about 79, really nice. And I sort of felt really that I should have it back in the collection because it is really, really good. So I guess I'm sort of resurrecting the sort of fantasy side of my collection as well. Beautiful, look at that jacket. They don't make it like that anymore. That's the trouble. Now, when I was in Wales a couple of days ago, I did that big walk. As I say, you'll see it in the video that I posted earlier this week. And after that, Swansea Mark and I went back to Cardiff, and we went for something to eat and drink. And you know, once we'd sort of regained our composure after walking 8 miles, we decided to have a quick look in Troutmark books. Now, I've done 2 videos which feature Troutmark books, and I'd say do have a look at them. It's a great little bookshop in Castle Arcade in Cardiff. And I did a little haul there, and I'll just show you what I got. So look at that. It's a little pile of things. And again, I was limited to what I could afford and what I could carry. So I got 9 books. And I think last time I went in there, I think I said that the lady behind the counter told me that somebody brought a collection in, and they were sort of pristine. I got a load of Doc Smiths and a few other things. And she said they'd been in biscuit tins. And I went in there the other day, and some of them were still there. There were still some Doc Smith things there. There were Andre Norton things there from last time. Catherine Kurtz things there from last time. There were also a load of Alan Dean Fosters, and I didn't buy any of them. They weren't the tie-ins, because we tend to think of Alan Dean Foster as the guy who wrote the tie-in for Alien and Dark Star and Splinter in the Mind's Eye, the first Star Wars novel, those sort of things. But they had a lot of his other fiction. They were in really nice Del Rey A formats. Unbroken Spine's beautiful, brand new looking. So, you know, maybe if there's some there next time, I might indulge myself. We'll see. So what did I get? Well, I got some fantasy and science fiction. I'm just going to go through it random, really. And as I say, there was some Andre Norton there, and Andre Norton is generally regarded as mostly a children's writer. She wrote adult books as well. I picked this up because at a glance it looks like a door book because it has a yellow spine. Even the the sort of font used on the spine makes it look like a door book. This is the Jargon Pard, and a pard, of course, is a big cat. Pardus, Panthera pardus, is what you call a leopard in the Latin. And this is a science fiction novel about somebody who's transformed into a leopard, as far as I can tell. But the yellow, it's even got the yellow text block. It's from Fawcett, but it does rather look like a door book. And I think this is from 72. And Door hadn't been really going very long then. It's 74. Door had only been going about 2 or 3 years then. So obviously they were doing cleaning up on the newsstand, and Door published a lot of Norton as well. So obviously Fawcett decided maybe to try and make their books look like Door to get them to sell in the same way. So there you go. So that'll probably be quite minor, but I'm sort of quite drawn to sort of science fiction novels about cats at the moment. That's starting to become a thing with me as well. Sad but true, I know. So there you go. So that was the first one. What else did I get? Well, I got a couple of fantastic fantasy collections here. I'm not going to call them novels, as they're not as such. And I was looking at copies of these on eBay a while ago, and they sold, and they're quite hard to come by, especially in good nick and especially cheap. And this is the volume 1 of the Magical Misadventures of Harold Shear. This is the Incomplete Enchanter by Sprague de Camp and Fletcher Pratt. And this is one of the great sort of heroic fantasy sagas, and they're about this chap called Harold Shear who discovers the mathematical rules of magic. And there are 2 novellas in here, and they were published, I think, in something like Astounding around about 1940, and collaborative things. And these are amongst the texts of contemporary fantasy writing. So it's a really, really beautiful. Sphere, can't go wrong. So that's the first one. And I also got the third one, The Enchanter Completed. And you'll notice on these that the way that complete or incomplete is spelt is the medieval way, which is just the way it should be for something like this. So volume 1, volume 3. The second volume is called Castle of Iron, and I think that's actually more like a novel. That wasn't there, but I'm not too bothered about that. I just wanted to get this stuff into the sort of library, and I have read some of these in anthologies before. So there's 4 little stories in there, and as I say, 2 novellas in there. Classy stuff, that's what you want. Proper American sword and sorcery, up there with Lieber and Vance and Anderson, and then Andre Norton and Michael Moorcock come along later on, because Moorcock's British, of course. So yes, I was really pleased with those. I thought they were really nice. And Unbroken Spines, you can't go wrong. Something that looks like fantasy but isn't is this book, Tapestry of Time by Richard Cowper, and this is in Orbit. This is from the mid-80s. I know it's from the mid-80s without even looking because I used to sell it. And this is the third of the White Bird of Kinship series, and I've never read this one. I've been revisiting Cowper quite a lot recently, and I like his work a lot. He's sort of very English, gentle, post-New Wave, literary SF, sometimes a bit too gentle. He's kind of like sort of John Wyndham, Keith Roberts, and he's not a flashy writer. He's quietly sort of literate and very, very good. And sometimes I found that he's not quite flashy enough for me, but I've never sort of read this one. I've read others in the series, and I thought I needed to complete the trilogy, really. This was £2. And it's very, very expensive and hard to find in hardcover secondhand. Some of his books in good nick and hardcover are very uncommon and very expensive, so I was very pleased to get that. With the trilogy, I've got them all in different covers. The first one's a pan lozenge. The second one I've got in hardcover, but I'm not really that bothered. But yeah, really, really nice. So that was a sort of warm glow as well. So if I ever see the others in the same livery, maybe I'll pick them up. Who knows? I mentioned that I bought a load of E. Doc Smiths in my last visit to Troutmark, and I bought 8 out of 10 of the Family D'Alembert series, and I left 2 of them there because they were American editions rather than the Panther Granada Grafton editions. And I thought later on, well, I should have got them all. and there were two Berkeley ones. One of them had gone when I was there the other day. This one was still there, Eclipsing Binaries, which is a great title, in great nick. I do love Berkeley. I really like that livery, and I thought I'll pick that up. It would be nice to have the Granada Grafton ones, but I don't really want to commit to that, you know, unless I can get them in tip-top condition, and that is in tip-top condition, so there we go. So that almost completes the set of 10. In previous book haul videos, one of them I think was the second Hay-on-Wye trip I did, and I think the other one was again Troutmark. I got 2 books in this trilogy by Lindsay Gutteridge, and I got the second volume at Troutmark the other day. So I think I had the first one, which is called Cold War in a Country Garden. I think I got that in Hay. And then at Troutmark, last time I got Fratricide is a Gas, which is one of the best titles in the history of books. And the middle one, Killer Pine. So I've got that now. So I've got the trilogy, and, you know, in a common livery, really good. Again, my standard unbroken spine, not leaning, lovely. So that's fantastic. So that completes that little trilogy, which is nice. I mentioned that they had a load of Catherine Kurtz. I mentioned it today and also last time. Catherine Kurtz, sort of American fantasy writer, dynastic, what have you. And they got a load of books there by, a lot of which never published in the UK. And I bought this because it was a curio. And I'm quite getting into curio collecting, which is something atypical by a writer. She mostly wrote fantasies, as I said. This is an SF novel, The Legacy of Lair by Avon. And this is interesting. Again, it's about cats, and this to me sounds like Master of Everon by Gordon R. Dixon. So I'm getting into this sort of big cat SF as well. So I'll let you know. You know, it's going to be fairly minor. It's got illustrations in it. What? There you go. There's one there. It's got a big cat in it. So, you know, we'll see. So maybe my big cat SF collection, which is currently at 3 books, will expand. Who can say? But I just thought, as a curiosity, just to see what somebody who normally writes fantasy is like when they take on SF. It's actually got like a crime plot, what the Americans call a mystery. So I'm uncertain. I don't think it'll be sort of great shakes, but I thought I'd give it a try, and I've never ever come across it before, never seen it, never heard of it. So there you go. There's an unusual one. My last sort of score at Troutmark was this rather handsome copy of Rule Golden by Damon Knight. Look at that for a cover. I've always said there should be a Queen's Award for Lurid, and boy, that is it. Now, I've had a copy of this before, and you do see it about, and quite honestly, it's always in a total mess. It's got a red text block. Let me just give you the full close-up to get the lurid factor. Isn't that wild? And the sort of alien with 3 arms, 3 legs, 3 eyes, and the chap who's sort of running alongside him. I guess it's kind of an intergalactic marathon. I have read that story, so I do know about it. And it's quite clever, and there are, I think, 5 or 6 little novellas in here. They're from the 1950s, and there's a really good introduction by Damon Knight, whose reputation really rests on his work as a critic and a book reviewer. I mean, he wrote SF novels, he wrote lots of stories. Again, he's never blown me away. I do like his novel The Man in the Tree, which came out in the 80s, and I enjoyed that. And there's some good stuff in this. And he said, you know, he tried to write unusual stories, and he talked about Horace L. Gold and Galaxy and how helpful he was, and how he would say, you know, writers would come along with an idea and Gold would turn it on its head and say, why don't you do that instead? And how he found that stimulating and sometimes frustrating. So that's what to look out for, but you'd be very hard pressed to find it in good nick. It's got unbroken spine. There's a slight ripple I can feel, but, you know, for the cover alone, it's kind of a must buy, really. And, you know, I guess Damon Knight is best known for his Twilight Zone episode, To Serve Man, which you can stream on Amazon Prime. You'll have to pay for it, of course. And to me, To Serve Man, which was one of his 50 stories again, is pretty much the inspiration for, you know, something like Michelle Faber's Under the Skin. And Under the Skin is a great book. It's really well written. I've read it twice, and I think it's fantastic. And people will have mostly seen the film with Scarlett Johansson. But, you know, it's amazing. When that came out, there's all these people from the world of mainstream literature, you know, people who've never read SF, who looked at it and saying, oh, you know, this is, you know, fantastic original book. It's not. It was basically To Serve Man, you know, so there you go. So Damon Knight got there first. Don't let that stop you reading Under the Skin by Michelle Faber, because it's fantastic. But Damon Knight got there first. hardcovers. Let's have a look at some hardcovers. This is some stuff which, again, I've acquired over the last few months on and off, some of it recently, and I just thought I'd run through some of it with you. I talked about Richard Cowper earlier on. Yes, I know it's Richard Cooper. I say Cowper, so we know what we're talking about, so you know what the spelling is, because, you know, you look at Richard Cooper, C-O-O-P-E-R, and there'll be loads of them. You look at Richard Cowper, say C-O-W-P-E-R, and there'll probably only be one. He's somebody I pretty much read all his early stuff, but I kind of got rid of it, and I wish I'd sort of hang on to it really, because he's very good. It stays quiet sort of talent, and no longer with us, sadly. And this is his first novel, Breakthrough, Dobson, and that has a slightly faded spine. This is a book which, you know, in really great nick is very, very uncommon and very expensive, but I got that for a £5, which is just fantastic. So I can't remember a thing about it. I really need to reread it. So I got that one. And I then managed to get also for a £5, which I couldn't believe, because this is really, really, really sought after. This is his second novel, Phoenix. Again, I've read this before. I had these in paperback. They're more common in American paperbacks than they are in UK ones. And, you know, this is a book which you're normally looking about 30, 40. I think Andy at Cold Tonnage has one on for 50 quid. And it's in really good nick. So I was really pleased to get that. So that's absolutely fantastic. So that's Phoenix. And I do love that jacket. And it's Dobson again. Nice and simple. And I recently scored a little bit more. I had to sort of make an offer, and I got the guy to come down a bit below his bid. This is his third novel, Domino, and I know that Andy at Cold Tonnage has one of these on in, you know, as new condition for £50, and I got this for less than 20. And again, it's very, very slight lean. Great cover. I have read this as well, but again, I can't remember anything about these books, so I need to revisit them. But that's part of the plan for when I do a big English SF reread. So that's Richard Cowper. Very pleased to get those. More mopping up. Somebody who I've recently been thinking I need to sort of complete the collection is John Sladek, who I've read lots of books by. This was pretty much his last novel, Bugs. Came out about 86, Macmillan UK. This book is everywhere, and I mean, in a way, that's probably why I never picked it up, because you could get it pretty much anywhere. You go to Hay and you'd see it and what have you. If you look on the internet, there's loads around. I think I paid £4 for this one as a first. It did have a Paladin paperback. I don't think it was particularly well received. I've never got around to it, and I've just thought, well, you know, I really should have it. It's probably really good. You know, very often some of the really most neglected books are the best. So if you want to get a late Sladek, that's an easy one to find. A bit harder to find, a little bit more expensive, was this collaboration between Sladek and Disch, Black Alice, and a bit of a faded spine there. It's W.H. Allen. Star was their paperback imprint, and gosh, I mean, Star was like the runt of the litter in the early 80s, and yet my first Charles Bukowski was in Star. They had Henry Miller, they had Eric van Lusbader as well, but there you go. And Sean Hudson. Hey, Sean. So, you know, this is quite an uncommon. Great pictures of the guys on the back. There was a Carolyn Graf paperback of this in the 90s, which I remember selling. For some reason, I don't think I ever got around to buying it. So, yeah, so that's great. Great period one to have. Very pleased to have that. I am looking for a few more of Sladek's more obscure books. Invisible Green is virtually impossible to get. Black Aura, there seem to be loads of copies of Black Aura in Australia for some reason. So, you know, Sladek obviously had a bit of a following over there. So did Richard Cowper, funnily enough, and Christopher Priest. So it could well be maybe Sladek visited and did some cons and things over there. Who knows? But yes, I'm very, very pleased to get that one. So if you ever see it, snap it up, because it's uncommon. Damocles here in Holt, Reinhardt and Winston, American first. This was £4. It's not in fantastic nick. There's some sort of problems with the jacket, some rubbing, and there's some sort of minor piercing and what have you. Just there, I have covered it. Slightly ambiguous about late Sheckley, because the later novels are not sort of widely regarded, and it feels that, and it's generally thought that his sort of attention had wavered and stuff, but it's got a really nice jacket design. Damocles, I like that title. You know, drama and the Damoclean sword, the two things come together, and I'm sure it'll be great fun. And you know, for less than £5, I mean, there is a nice copy out there on AB at the moment in the UK for £20, but I mean, that was a bit much, I felt, really, for me. So for £4, that's great. And on the back there is some you know, glowing little reviews from Harlan Ellison and Norman Spinrad, which, you know, in themselves are well worth reading. The Ellison one's fantastic. He says, once again, the publishing industry is recklessly loose, Sheckley honest. Dire warnings of no use. Readers may try in vain to flee before the berserk humour of he who may be truly called the Groucho Marx of fantasy fiction. You know, at the end of the quote, Ellison says, waiter, check, please. So there you go. You can't really go wrong with that, can you? This, Bars of America by Neil Ferguson, which is mainstream rather than SF. And it's got this sort of hopper jacket, except it's not the real hopper because the soda jerk doesn't have the hat on. Aha, that's how you know, you see. Art freaks, all of us. And this was cheaper. You know, the postage was more expensive than the book. This was £2 and the postage was £3.50. And it's published by Hamish Hamilton, sort of end of the 80s. And Neil Ferguson was somebody I remember contributed stories to Interzone magazine, SF stories. I don't think he ever wrote an SF novel. And, you know, this is one of those books that haunt you and you think, well, I maybe should pick that up, really. And, you know, it's so beautiful. And, you know, for £2 and £3.50 postage, absolutely marvellous. That's, that was on Abe Books, ABE as I call them. And, yeah, it just shows to show you there's some lovely scores out there. It's in really good nick as well. So, beautiful, beautiful jacket. So that's when I'm in a sort of late 80s American short story mode, though I do think it's a novel. Great stuff. I have mentioned my love for certain liveries from certain British publishers certain times, predominantly the 70s and 80s, and you know the 80s is important for me because I was, you know, really enjoying being a young bookseller and, you know, sort of immersing myself in the world of publishing, bookselling, and in SF in particular, amongst many other things. And something I really like are these mcdonald hardcovers from before mcdonald really got Orbit going as a hardcover imprint. It was a paperback imprint then. And this is Jerry Pournelle, who's very right-wing, King David's Spaceship. This was published as a door paperback in the 70s under the title A Spaceship for the King, I believe. But this is how I remember it. King David's Spaceship. I like the biblical sort of feel of that. And it's got this warrior on the cover with what looks like some sort of strange axe and a spaceship in the background. And, you know, I'm sure it's an enjoyable hokum. And I must admit, I've never read a solo Pournelle, not even a short story. So yeah, and I do like this livery. These sort of things are uncommon in good nick. They're always worth picking up. Some of them are worth a bomb. This one isn't. If you ever see any of the Piers Anthony ones, man, buy them because they're just insanely collectible and really uncommon, but really nice. And I've got a few just like this, so with Niven and Pournelle. I've got one of Niven and Stephen Barnes, you know, and so I thought that'd be a nice little augmentation to that little tranche of McDonald's. Lovely stuff. I got that from Durdles, great little dealer in Birmingham. Very good Durdles. Look them up. One of the spikier characters on the British SF scene, and I mean that sort of primarily in terms of his writing. I think he was described by J.G. Ballard one stage as the only British SF writer of ideas, which was a bit unkind, was Ian Watson, and Ian's still writing today, and he had a huge critical reputation in the 70s and 80s. He wrote an awful lot of books, and he was always quite difficult, you know, he's very challenging, great ideas. And I remember reading The Jonah Kit, which I think was his second novel, which is about using whales to communicate. And I don't mean my country. I mean cetaceans to communicate with aliens. It was fantastic, and I put it in 100 must-read science fiction novels. And it's one of those books where all the characters are unsympathetic, but it's brilliant. I really loved that because, you know, the idea was king, and he's very much an ideas man, and he wasn't afraid to make things difficult, you know. And I liked that. And I picked, this is a book club edition of Alien Embassy, and you know, this I think was £3, and I could have probably got a Gollange Yellow Jacket for an 8 or 10, but for £3 I couldn't really turn it down. And I do have this slight book club fetish going on at the moment. And yes, orange, it was in really good nick. I think I got this from Clearwater Books. They're on AB and they have some great stuff. They're really good for book club editions actually, so well worth a look if you're going that way. And yeah, fantastic stuff. So I got that, and that got me thinking about Ian's work and how I'd like to sort of reappraise it and go back to it, because I've got some, I've read quite a few, and I decided to look to see what else was out there. And the first book I think I bought by him was this book, The Very Slow Time Machine, which is a collection of short stories. And this is Golanc's Yellow Jacket. This is signed. And, you know, I remember it's just sort of spiky stuff, you know, and he doesn't make it easy for you. And, you know, good for him, you know. And he's one of those people who conceptually, he comes up with some amazing stuff all the time. It isn't always easy to read, but challenging. And, you know, good science fiction should be challenging. You know, it should sort of like open your head up. And there's some great stories in here. So I'm kind of revisiting Ian's work. So I'm looking at it again. I decided in that case to pick one of his later collections up because I'm better read in his early work. And I did read some of his 80s books at the time. I read The Fireworm, which was really good, and his horror novel, The Power. His horror novel, Meat, is marvellous, marvellous book. Really, really good. Sort of like an early sort of vegan, vegetarian, animal rights horror novel. And it's just great. And what a title, Meat. That was really good. And I read King Magic, Queen Magic, or is it Queen Magic, King Magic? That's a great one, which is sort of a chess fantasy. That's a great novel as well. And I never got around to picking this up. And this is a book you can get, you know, usually for about 5 to 10 quid quite easily. This is Stalin's Teardrops, which is a short story collection. He wrote an awful lot of short stories. He's still active, of course. He's done loads and loads and loads of them. And this is a Golanc's. It's not a Golanc's Yellow Jacket, as you see. It's black and silver. It's very handsome. So I always really sort of found this book very attractive. So I decided to pick that up. I'm going to give that a go because I haven't read any stories by him for ages. So that'll go on the shelf beside my old copy of Very Slow Time Machine. Fantastic stuff. I'm looking forward to that and getting some sort of spiky, heavy, hard concept stuff into my brain. One of the very clever things that Ian did was write a novel via correspondence across the Atlantic with Michael Bishop, great American humanist SF author. And that was called Under Heaven's Bridge. And I think that was the late 70s, early 80s. They'd never met at that point. And they wrote this novel by correspondence. It's just absolutely fantastic. I'm sure there were 1 or 2 phone calls, but you know, you've got to hand it to them. And they're quite different as writers in lots of ways, though Michael was more spiky then. And I just thought I'd pull out this, Transfigurations, Golanc's Yellow Jacket, as you can see. And this is probably going to be the most common Golanc's Yellow Jacket ever. There's loads of copies on sale. You can pick it up in really good nick for about 4 quid. You know, I've had it like forever. And this is actually a Golanc's Masterwork. This is in Masterworks. You don't see it stock very often. And it's one of sort of Michael's early sort of, how can we put it, anthropological alien sort of works. And it's great stuff. So, you know, worth reading. So if you read Bishop and Watson separately and imagine them together and you go on to Under Heaven's Bridge, you know, can you imagine it? Who would write a novel by correspondence these days? Obviously, it had happened before. You know, there must have been classic novels. That makes me think of Henry James and Maddox Ford writing an SF novel together called The Inheritors about invaders from another dimension, which I read once. That's long out of print. I don't think they did it by correspondence, you know, but they probably met up and had a few gins and wrote it, what have you. But yeah, so that's Michael Bishop. Just an aside mention there after, you know, Ian Watson came to my head, and this popped into my head, and I thought I'd just show it to you. Finally, a few more British mop-ups that have popped up over the last few months of writers who I like, and I had some gaps and I've decided to fill them. And really, my gap filling at the moment is pretty much focused on British writers from the 80s. Some of whom are still active now, some are not. People I've read lots of books by, and there's certain ones I never got around to getting. And I was divided at the time about their merits or what have you. And recently I picked up this. This isn't a really hard book to get. This is Christopher Evans, who's Welsh. Welsh science fiction writer from Tredegar, and he's lived in London for years and years and years, where I think he's taught science and stuff. And his sort of body work is relatively small. I think he's done stuff under pseudonyms. Never had a massive amount of commercial success. Started being published by Faber, very friendly with Christopher Priest. This one is one from the 90s. I think it's from the 90s, called Mortal Remains. Let's have a look. 95, and I didn't get this at the time. I don't know why, I never got around to it. Mortal Remains, or Hairs of the Noosphere. And apparently this is very high concept space opera with lots of sort of hard SF and stuff in it. And I know why I didn't get it, because in 1995, I pretty much lost interest in SF. I was losing interest in SF in the early 90s. I felt there was nothing really new. I wasn't keen on the way the whole radical hard space opera thing was going. It seemed to be the only way that, you know, things were going, and it was strange to imagine a writer like this doing that. But having said that, this is not somebody who was out there writing English catastrophe novels. He wasn't all that pastoral and stuff. And I say he's Welsh, but he's great stuff. They've got one of his novellas is in my head from a anthology, which I've got up there somewhere, which is called Dark Fantasies. Let me just grab it. Hold on a second. So let's see. And he's got a novella in here, which is kind of like a ghost story or an uncanny story. It's really, really good. I've read it several times. I can't think what it's called, but it is in there. And great stuff. So he is a good writer. So I picked that up, and I'm looking forward to giving that a try and seeing what he does with that sort of whole 90s Posty and Banks thing. We'll see. I also picked up this, The Hour of the Thin Ox by Colin Greenland, which is the second in his Loose trilogy. This is published by Anwin Hyman, and Anwin used to be looked after then by my friend Jane Johnson. Hello Jane, who is a novelist, editor, publisher, all-round good girl, as they say. And I say this is the second in a Loose trilogy from Colin. This was the first, Daybreak on a Different Mountain. And funny enough, I've never read these. I've read the third one, which is called Other Voices, and I've had it, oh gosh, I couldn't tell you. I think I got it from the Anwin rep. Jim used to live next door to me, you know, way back in the sort of late 80s. They're different formats, you know. This one's a demi, and that's an octavo, so that's a bit strange. But I do like Anwin. Colin Greenland is, what's he best known for? He's best known for Take Back Plenty, which was a space opera from about 88. Won the BSFA award. I think it won some other awards as well. It was a paperback original, trade paperback original, really knockabout fun space opera with a woman of colour as the lead character. So there you go. All this identity politics stuff is new. SF dealt with it a long time ago. We've got nothing to feel guilty about. And he did these. He did a couple of sequels to Take Back Plenty, and his career sort of fizzled out really. But I'm not sure what he's doing now. But his partner is Susanna Clarke, who wrote Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and more recently Piranesi. And in between, she wrote Ladies of Grace Adieu, which nobody seemed to read, even though, you know, the two books, you know, either side of it were like massive, but nobody seemed to read the short stories in the middle. How strange. That's the fickle nature of the mainstream bestseller reader. They read what they're told to, they don't essentially like it. So there you go. Maybe they didn't like them. But yeah, Colin was her partner. And the last book I read by him was a mainstream novel from Black Swan. And that must have been about 15 years ago, so I'm not sure what he's been doing since. But very elegant, witty and clever, so I'm looking forward to these. Something a little bit more sophisticated, not your usual sort of overblown sort of monstrosities. These are nice and slim, because I enjoyed the third one. They're loosely connected, so I'm sure I'll enjoy these in sort of like an M. John Harrison sort of way. Finishing off with a couple more fantasies. This again was very cheap. This is a book you can get quite easily. Again, it's Anwin Hyman. This is Callan Dane by Richard Burns from the mid-80s. Absolutely beautiful. And this is quite tragic in a way. Richard Burns, he did write a sequel to this. He took his own life, and I think that was in the 90s. And the narrative is allegedly that he took his own life due to frustration of being unable to make a living as a writer, which is a great shame. And I've got great fondness for these Anwin books, because in the late 80s I was doing events with people like M. John Harrison, Gary Kilworth, and Jane there, the editor, was producing some fantastic stuff, and they tried all sorts of different liveries and formats and designs. None of it really worked commercially, because, you know, it was a time when people like Raymond E. Feist and David Eddings were massive, and these things were just too rarefied and unusual. They were too imaginative. You know, they weren't cliched fantasies, even though they had a lot of the symbolism. You know, there was lots of variety, and a lot of them were set. You know, there's one called Baghdad by Ian Dennis. So the Middle Eastern ones, you know, all sorts of things, because Jane really sort of likes to sort of get out there and pick, you know, different sort of mythic backgrounds of fantasy. So, but very, very beautiful. So I'm trying to sort of pick up a few of the Anwin books as I come across them at, you know, reasonable values. And they're mostly fairly cheap. The problem is finding them in good nick. But when you can, they're usually pretty cheap, which is good news. Finally, I had to get this from Ireland, Michael G. Coney, who is credited here as Michael Greatrex Coney, and it says Great Rex. I always thought it was Great Orex, but, you know, Great Rex means, you know, Great King, and this is Fang the Gnome. Now, I don't normally buy books with titles like Fang the Gnome, but This is Coney. I love Coney stuff. He's quite adolescent in a way. He's a very sort of like sentimental sort of adolescent sexuality in his books, and I really like it, very romantic and what have you. And this is an Arthurian fantasy, and I do have a bit of an Arthurian thing going on these days, and I read some Rosemary Sutcliffe a while ago, and I've got more interested in Arthurian fantasy, so I'm trying to pick a few things up from the 80s, and it's absolutely lovely. It's cost me about 10 quid. It came from the Republic of Ireland, as I say. This is an American book. There was a British edition, which I think was a paperback from Orbit, and it's New American Library, NAL, as opposed to NEL, New English Library. So there you go. So we're ending on a bit of fantasy there. So that's a book haul. I hope that satisfies your urge for an orgy of book buying. And what will we be doing next? It's hard to say, really. Well, it's Saturday afternoon. It's my day off. I need to rearrange the entire hideout now, because you don't believe the amount of stuff I've got to move to do these videos. And yeah, I've had the haircut, so I'm feeling lighter. So I'm going to sign off now. Hope you enjoy your SF and fantasy reading. Please subscribe if you haven't. And, you know, I'll see you next time. Bye for now.